Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Adobo and Avocados. My name is Marie Cruz. I'm one of the developer advocates here at Grafana Labs. And today, as usual, I have my reliable sidekick with me. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Nicole van der Hoeven, otherwise known as Reliable Sidekick, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'd like to welcome to the stream over there, oops, I'm
Oops,
off
there you
camera,
go.
Jenna Charlton. Jenna, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jenna Charlton. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a developer advocate for Case. We do test case management software.
Awesome. There's three developer advocates here. I think this is the first time we've had all three developer advocates as part of
Yeah.
the live stream. But before we get to know you, Jenna, there's just a few announcements that we would like to share because I know the three of us will be at Agile Testing Days next week. So that's happening. It's really great because a lot of our guests as well that we have featured in Adobo and Avocados, they will also be attending Agile Testing Days. So it's gonna be great to see everyone. And yeah, just finally, we're gonna see people not just virtually, but yeah, in person as well. So Nicole and I will be doing a joint talk about intersectionality in tech and developer advocacy, and we'll also talk a bit about adobo and avocados. So yeah, we can't wait. We still need to practice yeah, our talk, 'cause
Yes.
yeah, but yeah, it's gonna be fine.
While we're on the subject, oh,
Yeah.
sorry, you go
No,
finish
no,
your
no, no.
the
You
answer.
can go. Yeah.
I was going to explain to Jenna the what adobo is.
Ah, yes.
So adobo is a Filipino dish, and it's a way of cooking food rather than like a dish itself, really. And it could be like pork and chicken or whatever, really, like leftovers, pretty much. And for many Filipinos, it's kind of like the national food, and it always reminds us of home. So we were just wondering, like, what is your adobo? It could be food, or it could be like something you do that grounds you and just is like a comfort activity or something like that.
Yeah.
So I've given this a lot of thought. And I realized and this is going to sound kind of strange, but I don't have I do in a way, but I don't have this is my home.
Mm.
Because I'm going to give you all a lot of backstory here. My parents split up when I was very young. And my father moved to North Carolina and my mother moved to Cleveland, which is where her and my dad grew up. And the food between the North and the South is different. And so up here, what I want is different than when I go down south. But what you can always count on, what always grounds me, centers me, starts my day, literally, is this. So
What
I
is that? We couldn't
oh,
really
it's just
see.
coffee. It's
Coffee.
Oh,
just a
well,
really good cup of
cheers.
coffee. Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I have now too. Like,
nice. I love it. It's definitely like comforting, and it feels like home no matter where I am in the world. I know I
Mm.
can't always get good barbecue. I can't always get a casserole, which is the most Midwestern thing you can eat. But I can always find a really good cup of coffee somewhere. So I realize that's what brings me home and grounds me and makes me feel like in myself.
Nice.
you are a person after my own heart because I too feel like, having coffee. Sometimes as Devrels, we're in different
Mhm,
countries or different places, and it can be kind of hard to get a routine going because
mhm,
everything's different. The language might be different. You might be in a hotel room, but you know what? Every country has
yeah.
coffee.
Yes. And
Yeah. I'm
it's oh, sorry.
sorry. I'm laughing because I'm gonna be the outsider here. I don't drink coffee.
Oh,
I've tried it. I don't know. It's just not for me. I drink tea though.
yeah.
So at least there's
Yeah,
some
yeah, we
there.
all know you're a Brit.
I'm
Not
not,
good enough
but
for the
it's just
EU, not good enough for coffee.
oh, here we go again. But yeah.
I
Sorry.
do like tea.
Yeah.
It's not that I dislike tea.
Yeah.
Pardon me. But give me 1 second. Oh, this is allergy time of year for me.
Yeah.
My father, when I went to visit him, I stayed the whole summer one year. Totally giving you backstory again. But I stayed the whole summer, which was longer than I usually stayed. And he was giving me a cup of coffee every morning, and I was like 11. So I am now like I cannot go a day
Without
without a
coffee,
cup of
yeah.
coffee, or I literally have withdrawal.
Oh,
I do love it. It's also maybe a problem.
yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things. Like I now feel the same way with tea, but yeah, I can imagine that like to start our day, we really need some sort of energy boost. So that's
Absolutely.
expected. Yeah.
So, Jenna, other than the fact that you love your coffee, what do you do other than drink coffee?
Like to get my day started, or
No, just like
oh,
in
In
general.
in
general.
general, in
What
general.
would
Oh
you like
gosh.
to say?
So I have the most boring life that is not boring at the same time, because everything is very structured right now. So I'm in my second year of grad school of a 3-year program. So I have like certain days and certain times that I work on homework, certain times that I work on research, certain times that I work on work, and that all gets thrown up in the air when I travel. But my life right now centers around like work, school, and sometimes get sleep. Um, and I cannot wait until all of that backs off and I
Mm,
get to just work and then maybe have like a social life again. But like I
mm,
love to do Lego, and I love to speak and connect with community, because like testing is a community. We talk about communities in tech all the time, but there's a difference between the interconnectedness of the testing world and the interconnectedness of the dev world.
mm,
Um, One, there are more developers than there are of us. But two, there's just something about the way testers communicate and kind of this fraternity of testing almost, although I hate saying fraternity because it's gendered, but I can't think of another word to use other than say sorority. Um, but there's something about the nature of that I love, and how we are very reliant on each other in a good way. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's where I went with it.
Yeah. I'm gonna add because I remember like because we're both in the Women in Testing channel, and
Mhm.
I remember you posted a video about Blink 182 concert. So I'm assuming you like punk rock
Oh yeah.
music. Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing that I know at least. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, wow. Jenna, we have to talk because I went to the one in Hamburg.
so good, right?
I love Blink 182.
They're
Yeah.
gonna tour again.
I
I'm
I
so
really hope I can get some tickets this time. So anyway, Jenna, so you shared with us that you're a developer advocate
excited.
for Case. We're curious to know like what's been your career journey to tech so far? Because I'm guessing, being a developer advocate, that was like much later on. So can you tell us a bit of background story as to how you got started in tech?
Yeah, so my testing origin story. Um, I I bounced around from terrible job to terrible job, um, because all cards on the table. I didn't graduate high school originally. I wound up finishing later through a correspondence school because I had some weird family stuff. Um, and so I kind of like just wandered into doing customer service jobs, because in the US, that's what you do when you don't have a degree and you don't want to work retail. Um, so I was doing customer service jobs, and through the magic of luck and timing and networking, and hard work, I managed to meet somebody who introduced me to the hiring manager at a company called Brand Muscle, and I was hired into their help desk. And it just kind of took off from there. They let me try testing. I fell in love with it, and then I just kind of moved up in testing. Then I spent a little bit of time doing consulting and training in testing. And then I was the director of product for a company for a little while in the testing space. But I definitely learned that product is not for me. Um, it's not where I belong. And I went from there to developer advocate. And really, when I was looking for that next role, which is where I am now, I kind of said it's got to be something where I can see an impact, because I wasn't able to see an impact when I was in product. They talk about how you're the CEO of product. I didn't feel like I owned anything. But in testing and in dev advocacy, I get to have some autonomy again, which is huge. It really changes your perception of work.
Yeah. I think it also goes to show that career progression isn't linear, like what most people think. I really love that you just try out things and you're not scared of holding back. You've tried product, it didn't work for you, and now you are in a developer advocate role where it's also again different career path. Because I remember when I first um got this job as a developer advocate, I did the career switch as well. And some people have said, "Why are you gonna switch to a role that's like way down in terms of what your current like level now?" Because I was already in like an
Mhm.
engineering manager role, and then the next step after that would be like head of quality or
Yeah.
something. And like when I explain it to people, it's like, yeah, but it doesn't have to be linear,
Yeah.
and it can just be like tech is such a like a big industry in terms of the roles that you can try out. There's different roles for everyone at different levels, and it's just showing that you can learn different types of skills if you also move non-linear way, which
Yeah.
I think we should communicate that more often.
I think we also need to change the perspective of going from IC to management is linear progression. Um, because it's not, it's a step onto a new ladder.
Yeah.
And it's something we're better about with developers. We're really bad about with testers. Not everybody is meant to be a leader. Not everybody wants to be a leader. We need to ensure there's ways to stay IC,
Mhm.
but be able to contribute at the level at which you're capable of contributing. That's where the principals come in. Like, we
Yeah.
need those folks. Your best developer is not going to be your best manager. Sometimes they will, but more often than not, the impact they're having is in the way that they're able to coach and support and drive like the process. They're not necessarily going to be a good people manager. And we're really bad about creating that distinction. But the other piece of it is that because I'm ADHD, I'm always just chasing the dopamine. So I will try new things because something excites me and I will jump into it head first.
Yeah.
Um, because that's what excites me at the moment, which means that it's giving me dopamine and making me happy.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned when Marie talked about having like this narrative that we all share, that first you have to go into school and you have to get a university degree in computer science or whatever it is, and then you become, you know, a tester or a developer, and then you move on to this, and you've kind of subverted all of that because,
Mhm.
like you said, you had a non-traditional experience with education, and then you've gone into tech, and then now you're also kind of in that linear framework going backwards, but it's not actually backwards because nobody actually stops you from doing things in parallel,
Mhm.
or there isn't really an order to these things. So I really like that you're kind of jumping around and doing what feels right for you.
Thank you. I cannot express enough. I can't say enough how much more successful I've been in like getting my bachelor's and now in grad school by doing it the way I did than I would have been if I had done it when I was 18.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to be. I wasn't in a emotional space to be able to actually do it. And I don't have a STEM degree. Like my bachelor's is in learning design, and there's some amount of like tech in there because you learn instructional design. And my master's isn't a STEM degree either. The narrative that we have to get a CS degree needs to change. We need liberal arts education. We need people with a background in knowledge and ethics. We need people with weird, unusual degrees that bring a new perspective. But if we stick to this, like you have to get a degree in CS or you have to do management information systems, we got to go back to the old school way, which was you went to college because you went to college. It wasn't about getting a degree to get a job. It was you get a degree and then you go find the job you want. But all of that's changed.
That's exactly my sentiment as well. Because some of the testers or developers that I know, they didn't came from ACS background. Like most of them actually, they came from like a psychology background, so they offer different perspectives. Um, like much more on the human side of things as well. So I think you're absolutely right. Right when you said that. Um, oh,
I think they disappeared for a second.
yeah. Okay, we can sidetrack a bit, maybe, Nicole. But
Yeah, they're
oh, there you
back.
go. Yeah.
Yay. Welcome back,
Welcome back,
Jenna.
Jenna.
That was really strange. It just like
Yeah.
crashed and then came right back.
Yeah. We were gonna sidetrack a bit, but now you're back,
Okay.
so we're really glad. But yes, I was saying that you're absolutely right to say that we need to stop with the old school way of saying, like, even with job descriptions where it says that, oh, you need to have a CS degree, because like it's not 100% the correct requirement, like in a way, because there's also other disciplines or other areas where we need that diverse perspective, especially in testing, because we want to make sure that we can cover for all types of users, not just making sure that we cater to one identity or so.
And we need to honor the non-traditional paths in all of their different forms. One of the most talented developers I've ever worked with went to a boot camp. He had been in the military.
Mm.
I think he was Army. So like he was, boots on the ground military. He came out of the military, used his, what do they call it, GI Bill to go to a boot camp. He had been working as a tow truck driver. And he goes to this boot camp knowing very little math. They teach him all the math he needs. Comes out, and about a year into the job, he's coaching senior devs. Like he was just born to do this, but his brain doesn't work the way academia says it's supposed to. He instead was meant to learn this hands-on in a boot camp setting. But we've been really exclusionary to these folks for a really long time. It's really, really important to me, just as a note, that like we find ways to open the doors.
Yeah.
Tell us where your non-traditional path has brought you. What are you actually studying now?
So I am getting my Master's of Fine Arts in Experience Design, which is something no one's ever heard of.
I was gonna ask. Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to use this degree. I personally want to explore ways to use service-oriented design, so service design, not necessarily graphic design, to impact the way people work. So very closely related to like industrial organizational psychology. But IO is more on the research side. Experience design is more on the practical application side. But then I have a peer who is a professor of theater at University of Illinois. And she is using her like research to find ways to open up the theater to audiences who have never experienced it before. So she's researching interactive theater experiences to help people experience it for the first time. So there's a lot of different ways to use it and a lot of different applications, but it's very research based and it's all about understanding the sociology of the way people experience the world and the way they develop their realities.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about this topic because, by the way, I'm an economics graduate,
Okay.
but I also spent a lot of time with when I was majoring in
Yeah.
psychology. And at
Okay.
that point, I was doing industrial organizational psychology.
Okay.
And I would love to explore the intersection of design and testing. What do you think about that? What do you think the relationship is?
So there's a lot of relationships and there's a lot of places that they meet. It's almost like one of those, you could make a whole bunch of Venn diagrams of the places where things overlap. The research that I'm doing that will be the basis of my thesis is centered on testers as people as opposed to testing as a discipline. So I'm looking at how job title impacts a tester's experience in the role. Thinking about all of the different job titles that we give testers, some of them that mean nothing, some of them that have meaning. And that's where like my research for the semester is focusing. But I think that there's a lot of intersections of teaching testers about things like autoethnographic research and doing some real interrogation of how they feel in using an application and then using that to apply to testing. You know, I felt this while using this app. What does this tell me? Like, this didn't feel good. We say that a lot. Like, this feels bad. It feels, I don't like the feel of it. Okay, well, I need you to tell me more than that. I need you to be able to take those feelings and break them down into something that's actionable, because a defect has to be actionable, right? So there's a lot of ways to take something like the research approaches and experience design and apply that to developing testing strategies and techniques and behaviors and methodologies.
So I was thinking about the shift left movement, which we hear a lot about in testing, and the idea is that testing should not be one of the sequential phases in a waterfall model. Instead, we should try and incorporate it into every activity. And that's typically called shift left, although I think that's problematic because it still implies a linear progression. But the idea is usually that testing should begin even like in the requirements phase.
Mhm.
However, I think that there's a case to be made that testing should actually shift further left, which almost no one talks about, into design.
Mhm.
Because that's really, there's a lot of overlap between testing and design in the sense that they're both user centric. You know, the idea is that you're always thinking forward to who's going to be using it and coming from a place with empathy and starting to develop by designing, by trying to understand first the experiences of the users and then trying to cater for it. So I think that design is just like testing, is something that should be incorporated into every phase.
What I think where you're going with this is something that really excites me, which is this idea of co-creation. We've I shouldn't say allowed, because designers are fantastic at what they do, but we've kind of like outsourced the work to designers without being a part of the process for so long that we have taken all of our autonomy out of it and we've removed our voice from it. But really, there should be co-creation between the designer, tester, developer, business or product person, and, if I had my way, user. Like, the idea of co-creating an app with a user is really exciting to me. I don't know how to do it. I feel like there's a lot of like, in theory, this is totally possible. In reality, it's probably pretty hard, but I love the idea of bringing in that really early feedback loop, and having their voice, really using the voice of the customer instead of like the pretend voice of the customer that we like to talk about. But this all leads to a problem we have in Agile, which is that, I'm sorry for Agile folks. I'm an Agile folks too, but Agile is just faster waterfall. And because of that, we've removed these kinds of opportunities because we don't actually iterate. We just build in interim pieces. Real iteration requires constant refinement, but instead we just stack. And that like constant stacking, we broke it into chunks so we can stack it on top of each other, as opposed to we're co-creating, which means that we created a first version and we learned from it. And we actually threw out the first version and recreated. I think that was the initial idea, but we've moved very far away from it. I veered us, but I think we're still talking about the same thing.
Yeah. One thing that I would like to add as well, because I totally agree that testing should really start much earlier on, apart from just the requirements gathering stage. Because I think this is where we can think of it as like the phase zero, like the initial start. And often than not, like I've been on like certain projects where, okay, people from like the leadership team or like the stakeholders, and then you've got someone from engineering, but then you're asking, okay, but who's the representative from the testing discipline? And I honestly believe that we can be part of that process, because as early as possible we should be able to challenge, or like as part of what Dan Ashby has mentioned in his continuous testing in DevOps blog post, we should really be challenging the ideas right from the start, because we can explore all the different possibilities, and then really think of like the users from the beginning, rather than, okay, this is what the leadership team wants, this is what we're gonna test. But it should be like, okay, how can I challenge them to think differently about a certain product? So
Yeah, I
I
totally
think
agree.
there's also some overlap between the movements of test-driven development, which is the idea that you first write a test and then write the code that makes it fail, and then write the code that makes it pass, and then run the test. And behavior-driven development, which is focused on user behaviors, and also design-driven development, often called, D3. I think all of those are trying to come at the problem from different angles, and it kind of depends what hat you have on. And I just find it really interesting that we all have a background in testing and quality assurance. We all call ourselves developer advocates, and then Jenna's also studying design. So these are three disciplines that are typically treated as separate, entirely separate from each other, but they're actually not.
I totally agree. And I feel like what's been missing from all of these, from VDD, from TDD, from D3 is, although D3, it should be really centric, is this idea of first principles. Because first principles should be cohesive across all of these practices. And I'm going to forget pieces of first principles, but it's essentially example mapping, but at a much higher level, and a much more experiential level, because you're really kind of like doing okay, so this is what we think the solution is, but what if it was actually a boat? Or what if it was a tree? Like, and you're getting yourself out of your head into like, what kinds of off the wall questions can I ask to shake things up? But if we make first principles foundational in all of those, then we're all speaking the same language. And now we're all designing from the same place, be it behavior or design itself, or the code. And I'm sorry, I have a cat visitor keeps poking at me.
No, that's great. So you've already mentioned two things that I think those three disciplines share. So you mentioned first principles thinking and also asking questions
Mm,
as a practice that all three of those roles should do.
mm.
Marie or Jenna, does either of you have anything else that you think those three share in common?
I think so. In terms of one similarity, I think around inclusivity, definitely I can see that as a recurring theme, and this is really also related to the conversations that we had last week with Erin around accessibility, because um, we were talking about inclusive design, and Jenna, you're studying experience design. Um, I don't know much about experience design, but I'm wondering if there are any intersection between inclusive design and experience design.
I mean, absolutely. So, good experience design needs to have universal design and inclusive design at its heart. We design for disability first, knowing that designing for disability first means that we will now be able to accommodate the broadest cross section of participants or users or whatever it is that we're talking about. But experience design is kind of a broad term, because we use it in different ways. Cat visitor. We use it in different places in different ways to mean different things. But regardless of what it is, that should always be centered. And something that Dennis, who runs the program, always does that I love is if we're ever doing something that, hi, you can't be there, um, requires designing a physical space, he will immediately challenge if somebody hasn't directly said what the accessibility like functions are. What happens if somebody is in a wheelchair?
Mm.
That chair, like somebody used these really cool blow up chair things because they would be easily removable. And he goes, what happens if somebody with bad knees sits on that? Can they get out of it? Because it doesn't look like there's any stability to get up. So he challenges immediately. And now we all challenge each other in our group critiques because we've gotten used to that. It's something that honestly, if somebody's getting a CS degree, please, some university include this in a program. This should be part of their training.
Yeah. I think you're right that at like certain point we also challenge each other, because I remember like one thing at work, one of our colleague was creating a thumbnail for a
Mhm.
new show that we're doing, and I just like I think if I hadn't done a lot of accessibility stuff, I wouldn't even challenge for example the color contrast or like the use of fonts, but because I was exposed to that and I know that we want to be able to cater to a lot of users, me as a developer advocate, I suggested, hey, I know we're gonna launch this show. It's a really great thumbnail, but can
Mhm.
we make sure to update the colors so that
Yeah.
a person who's colorblind or they have other like color like they can't see certain colors will still be able to look at the thumbnail and get the information that they want. So I like that even with our roles as developer advocate, we still challenge those ideas and try to incorporate it, because it's really important. Like the design has to be universal, it has to cater to everyone, and if I was put in a position where, for because I have really bad
Yeah.
eyesight, I can assume all of us here because we're all wearing glasses. And if I have to look at a thumbnail that's really hard to read, and the colors are just making me dizzy or whatever, then I would want that experience to be better for me. So yeah, I think there's that intersection there, that as testers we should be learning about experience design or inclusive design to make sure that we can cover different aspects. And I think as developer advocates as well, because it's all about making impact to a lot of our users, and it's just a really small thing, but I think it's what matters, like all the small things that we try to do to make something much more accessible and inclusive.
I think it kind of goes both ways too. I think a lot of testers could be better at their jobs by thinking about design principles, but I
Mm.
also think that a lot of designers could be better at their job by thinking of some testing basics as well. So there's this interplay between them where when you think of design, you think of doing something one off, but maybe not as thoroughly testing, different combinations, or maybe not being aware of some techniques and tools that you can use, whether automated or not, to make sure that that is ruthlessly adhered to, that those principles are adhered to throughout the CI/CD pipeline. But also testers can also stand to draw themselves back a little bit and give themselves the capacity and the freedom to go in at a very early age and also help design.
Yeah, I completely agree. And give me 1 second because the cat's opened the door.
Well, while they're doing that, I also wanted to mention that, they talked about experience design. And I think one of the fields within that, in particular, particularly of some relevance here, is interaction design. Because I think there's a case to be made that
Yeah.
testing is most coupled with interaction design. Because when you think of like a test script or a test
Mhm.
case, usually what we're doing is following along the footsteps of the ways that users interact with the application.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's so much that I shouldn't put it the right way. We fail testers by not giving them more training in that area. And when I say training, it doesn't have to be in a formal classroom setting. Like just
Yeah.
in general, testers should be exposed to this more. They should get a little bit more understanding of human computer interaction, and more about the kind of psychology of using software, um, especially the psychology of using software across the generations,
Mm.
because there are very different expectations of the way something's going to work based on age group. As a elder millennial, I think that's what they call me, because I refuse to call myself the other thing that they call me. Um, um, I started desktop. Like I didn't have the internet at home until I was in high school.
Mm.
Um, but somebody younger than me, like if we're talking Gen Z, a lot of them are mobile first. The first thing that they used was a cell phone. When we talk about seniors, then I'm talking older than baby boomers, like I don't know what they're called outside of the US, but we call them the silent generation here. Um, they were mobile first as well because they didn't grow up with a computer. They were probably out of their working years or towards the end of their working years by the time people had a computer at their desk, but they probably have an iPhone. So
Mhm.
their expectation is kind of similar to Gen Z, but there's a different knowledge level and understanding there. But that's why like using things like standard icons is so critical. A mobile user knows what the hamburger menu is. If you decide to make your hamburger menu something else, it immediately becomes harder to find for two vastly different age groups. So having those kinds of understandings and that knowledge helps testers to be able to identify those trouble spots in design and interaction as early as possible, because designers want to make something beautiful. That's part of why they got into design. But it can't always be an art project. So we have to like temper that with what works and what's the right decision.
Yeah. And this is also the reason why I urge testers, like, oh, if you have a UX or like a
Mhm.
design team, and if they're doing user experience sessions, um, get invited to those. Like, if you're not part of the invite, then ask for it, because there's so much knowledge and test ideas that you can generate just by watching the interaction between the user and the application that they're using. Because I've said this in like different streams, but there's no amount of test scripts or test cases that will match what your users do.
Yeah.
Probably some, yes, like especially if you just want to focus on like the happy pot or like the really basic scenarios. We but we know that that's not the the case in real world. There's different variables, there's different factors, we all have different emotions associated with it, and the example that you've shared with the different generations, that is a great example. Because um, if you're, for example, if you're focused on one generation and you're not attending any of, I don't know, any of the other user experience sessions,
Mm.
you're disregarding a lot of other users as well. So there's so much value attending user experience sessions, or if there's like interviews with different users, just ask for those. Don't feel that, oh, because they haven't included me. Well, there's no harm in asking as well. So make sure to get involved in those types of sessions.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Nice. I'm interested to know as well, Jenna, because you mentioned a while ago that your research is about testers as people instead of testing as discipline.
Mm.
Could you maybe tell us a bit more about your research and the impact, I guess, that the different job titles that we have as testers? Because I know there's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So, what I'm looking at this semester, and it's part of a bigger like thing because it'll be my thesis. But this semester, I'm looking at how job title affects feelings of belonging and esteem for testers, both at a personal level and within their organization. So, are there job titles that maybe feel less prestigious for testers, or that testers feel like get less respect than other job titles? And how does that impact their experience in the job role? And this is for the purpose is kind of twofold. One is to better understand kind of the mindset of folks. The other side of this is creating meaningful guidance for hiring managers and HR and recruiters on what job titles people really want to have. Having some amount of standardization across titles and having them have real meaning will make it easier for testers to find jobs, and it will make it easier for companies to hire. And those job titles will have actual meaning behind them, symbolic meaning, because we talk about like some symbolic interactionism, and there's this idea of like a title can be a symbol. Once we're able to create meaning behind the symbol of the job title, we're able to now ascribe what that person looks like. What skills does that person have? What career level are they? What is their job path? What's their growth plan? We understand that when we understand who relates to it and how they relate to it. The other piece of this, and this came after I'd already started kind of putting the semester's research together, is I stumbled on this fascinating article that, Nicole, you might really be into. A researcher was looking at symbolic convergence theory, and they were looking at this idea of creating a shared understanding of what it means to be a teacher for teachers in the city of Chicago. And so they were using the symbol of the title of teacher to create convergent understanding. Because there's this, I don't want to go too deep, but constructivism says that each person creates their own reality based on the interactions that they have with people and non-human actors and things across their life and their culture and all of this stuff. And all of us experience the world differently. But symbolic convergence says that we can create shared reality through creating shared understanding. And in this case, creating shared identity. So I want to use those to really create identity.
I really love this topic. I have so much to say. The immediate thing that comes to mind is Carl Jung has
Yeah.
this. It is really a lot of his work is about the use of archetypes and symbolism, and I think that it can be difficult for some people to understand how symbols can be useful. But Carl Jung also has this idea of symbols being a collective thing, of being a shared narrative, that you can go either way, like with any labels. On the one hand, labels can be pretty detrimental when they're prohibitive or prescriptive, but when they are descriptive, they can be pretty freeing. And it's kind of like, so an archetype is kind of like a symbol that occurs in lots of different narratives, like fantasies it's called in convergence theory, but also in fairy tales, the idea of this hero's journey, or what does it mean to bite into a poisoned apple, and how does that relate to how testers feel when they've delivered code, or when they've delivered a test that doesn't work, or whatever. Like there are these shared stories that we as humanity kind of just recognize. And I totally understand where you're coming from, is when you have like this vocabulary of symbols that a community can share, everyone can kind of go like, oh yeah, I see myself in that, so I must be a part of this community. And there's like a whole lexicon of things that now we can converse about without having to specify, like, this is my experience. You can say, like, oh, here's the symbol, here's this archetype. I feel like, this kind of narrative minus these parts. And that can kind of be easier to come at an understanding with other people because we have shared symbology.
Exactly. That's exactly where I'm going with this. And I love, you're the first person who's been like, oh my gosh, I get it, because I get it, because I get testing and this idea. I've had a lot of people who get the concept, but they're like, I don't know anything about testing. I don't know about testers. This doesn't make sense to me. Oh, I'm so excited.
You are so awesome.
I think you're awesome.
No,
Oh,
this
it's
is really
great that the two
great.
of you will meet in person next week.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk all about symbolic convergence theory and Jung and archetypes. There's also like the collective unconscious idea of Jung's, and I wonder how that could also apply to testing. Maybe we're getting into like really nerdy territory here.
Okay, so I'm going to pull some articles so that we can talk about them in Germany.
That is awesome. But I do think the idea of the collective unconscious it seems a little mystical, but I think you can make the case that in any community, like a testing community, there are some things that some paths that we start to converge on, some ideologies that we converge on without even really talking about it and making it something very conscious. For example, this idea of, oh, hey, development and testing and design, hey, we're all saying the same thing. And yet these disciplines have developed pretty much separately. In most places, there's like a development conference and a design conference. Like those three are really separate for most people. But I'm really interested in kind of challenging that and saying, like, well, yeah, but the thing that they're converging towards, that must be where the real meat is. Like, that's worth talking about.
Yeah. I think this also encourages not just testers but from other disciplines, because now that we're talking about conferences, I think I remember seeing a post that even in conferences we create this silo feel of, as a tester I don't feel welcome in a dev conference, or like on a DevOps conference as well. But why not? Like, I think there's some topics that we as a discipline, like from a testing discipline, can share a lot, especially to the development communities, the design communities, DevOps communities, and likewise, they also have some ideas that I think we as testers can benefit from. Um, One of the objectives that I've set for myself for this quarter is I want to try to diverge to other communities and not
Mhm.
just focus on the community that I'm comfortable of. I'm also gonna try and submit papers to dev communities, to DevOps communities, and explain testing in a way that all of us can, talk about. So I really encourage everyone who's speaking at conferences to also go out of your comfort zone and reach out to other communities too.
I love dev conferences. Um, I my very first conference was Code Mash. For anybody who knows Heather, or it's not Heather, Hillary. Whew, getting my H names mixed up because it's still early for me. But Hillary was the track chair for quality at Code Mash, and Code Mash is kind of a polyglot conference. It's developers, testers, security, architect, like it's everything. Um, and so I got to talk to developers about testing. And then my next talk was a testing 101 for developers talk. Like it was, here's what testing is to developers. And I've taught like the fundamental test design techniques to developers. Um, Jenny Bramble and I did it together at a developer conference. um, so I love going to developer conferences. A lot of times their talks go over my head if they're super, super technical, but I pick things up, and every time I get to see somebody talking about something that's really complex, that's above my head, I get a little bit more of it and I get a little bit more exposure to this kind of stuff. And little by little, it starts to make more sense. And same thing for them with testing. But yeah, I encourage everybody, go to dev conferences, go to DevOps conferences, go to test conferences. But like, it's great to get to that other side of the world almost. I remember the post that you're talking about, by the way, and I was on the opposite side of a lot of people on that one because I was specifically talking about the uh, topic that the person
Mhm.
submitted, which was a very, very developer centric topic, but for a
Yeah,
test
I
conference.
remember. Yeah.
And I'm like I'd be interested in it, but I would have a hard time justifying it to my boss if I went to see your talk instead of a different talk. And that's the really hard part about conferences is that if you're paying your own way or you're a speaker, you get to go whatever you want. Oh, they opened the door again. Can you are you hearing that?
Yeah, it's not so bad though.
So the problem with older houses is that nothing is quite square, which means that it's really easy to like have a cat push their head against the door and open it. Anyway. um, so we're asking our companies to spend money on this. And there's got to be a return on investment from their
Mm,
perspective. I hate saying it, but I also get it. This is not cheap. Some conferences, you're spending $6,000 to send somebody to it,
yeah.
between hotel and travel and conference admission and reimbursing your food. So if it's a talk that doesn't apply to our job, it's hard to make the case that like, oh yeah, I went to this one instead of this talk that directly applies to what I do every day. Um, anyway, I got off track.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good perspective because I think us as developer advocates, we are in a very lucky position that we can go to conferences.
Mhm.
But I know for a lot of people it is not the case. So there's also that other angle that yes, there needs to be a return of investment. That if it's 100% or not even 100%, but if it's like related to your job, then yeah, it's much better than attending that conference because it is an investment, like from the company side too.
Yeah.
So I think um we've talked a lot about the intersection between, I guess, design and testing. Um, are there other principles, I guess, that you could share from experience design that can help us become better testers?
I think the biggest principles from experience design, how do I put this the right way? So this is a really open-ended discipline.
Mm.
And as opposed to principles, I would suggest bringing in theory. And the theory that I really encourage people to think about are things like systems thinking. And so there's, I always mispronounce her name, but there's a book, Thinking in Systems.
Danella Meadows.
Yeah, thank you. Like it's on my bookshelf.
It's on my Kindle.
Yeah, it's such a good resource for learning to think inside and outside of systems and to understand how systems work together. Because we like to think of systems just in terms of hard systems. We think about software as a system, but your user is a part of that system, but also a part of other systems. And your development team and you are part of that system, but also part of other systems. And any change in any of those systems changes all of the other systems. So understanding the principles, the theory behind all of that helps us do better testing because we have a better understanding of all of the risks, because all of those systems have inherent risks. And it just gets you thinking in new ways. It gets you exploring a little bit more in your thinking. And you can always go to like the more challenging option, like Jerry Weinberg's book. But that's a really tough one. And I wouldn't recommend it. I do actually recommend it quite a bit, but it's read the other one first.
Well, this is the second time I've heard that book. Nicole also shared that book with me this week. So it's like a sign that I have to read it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think Jenna's me, just with different colored hair.
Yeah. I'm feeling some like, I don't know, some shared interests and yeah.
A lot
Just
of
a
shared
little
interests.
bit, yeah.
Amazing. I guess just to end this, Jenna, because we are almost out of time, we always like to ask the same questions to our guests. So if you have one piece of advice to other women or other underrepresented groups who want to have a career in tech, what would be your advice?
Find who just constantly be discovering who your authentic self is. I didn't come out as non-binary until I was in my late 30s because I didn't have the language to describe what I felt when I was a teenager. And I was kind of told to perform gender, like it was a costume because that was what was expected of me. But as soon as I started to live authentically as who I realized I was inside, my sense of self increased. My backbone got stronger. I mean, not really. I have a bad back, but from a descriptive standpoint, like I just stood up a little bit taller. I felt more empowered. I was able to challenge and say things to people's faces that I'd never been able to say before. And sometimes I take a little overboard. Sometimes I'm feeling my Wheaties too much, but I am better as a partner. I'm better as an employee. I'm better as a student. I'm better as a human when I am living as true to who I am like inside as I can be. So that constant self-discovery is my advice. But anybody, no matter who you are, I think it's critical.
Yeah. I think as well, Jenna. So I've seen like the way you voice your opinions, and it's really inspiring because I know testing as an industry, we still have a long way in terms of making it inclusive, making it welcome to everyone, because there are still people out there who share stuff as if they're not being like an empath. But the way you voice things and the way you share your opinions, it's really inspiring because you're voicing out that yeah, there's also other groups of people in the testing industry. It's not just this certain characteristics or this certain way of working. So thank you for being that voice. And yeah, we're really happy that you've agreed to be a guest at Adobos and at Adobo and Avocados today.
I am so appreciative of getting to be here, and I am so grateful you were flexible with my schedule screw up that I made.
We're grateful that you were flexible because we were supposed to start this much more earlier.
Yeah, that was me. But it's been
And I
awesome
forgot
to
about
have
daylight
you
savings time.
on.
So like all the way around, we were all on different schedules.
Yeah.
But no, I am. This was fun. This was really cool, and I'm so Maria. I always love getting to talk to you, and Nicole. It was so cool getting to meet you, and now I'm so excited for us to talk in Germany.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is it for today's episode. Again, Jenna, thank you so much. Next week, as we mentioned already, we'll be at Agile Testing Days, but we've got an episode sorted out for you. So, yeah, make sure to still um, watch that. And yeah, I guess this is the end. I hope everyone will have a great day. And again, thank you so much, Jenna, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Jenna. Bye,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Oops, let me just I haven't clicked on the screen. Sorry. Bye.